My sister insisted it was unfair that I lived alone in such a big house and demanded that I let her move in. I said no, and I also stopped the financial support I'd been giving her family. She tried to pull others into the situation to pressure me, but in the end, it all blew up in her face. She told me I was selfish, cold, and a bad sister, all while sitting in my home, drinking my wine, and eating the lasagna I'd made. But it was what she demanded next that truly shattered everything I thought I knew about family. The evening light, usually so warm and inviting in my kitchen, felt suddenly harsh, glinting off the polished countertops. The clatter of forks against plates, the distant hum of the refrigerator, it all sharpened into an almost unbearable silence, heavy with unspoken accusations. Outside, the world was quiet, but inside these four walls, a storm was brewing. My name is Sarah, and I'm 41. Every single thing I possess, this house, my car, my savings, I earned through sheer grit. Showing up, staying late, saying yes to every opportunity, that terrified me. Nobody handed me a damn thing. And that matters deeply for what I'm about to tell you. My sister, Emily, is 36, 5 years my junior. And growing up, we were inseparable, genuinely close. I remember her little footsteps padding into my room during thunderstorms. I'd make up silly stories until her breathing softened into sleep. The love I felt for her was so fierce, it sometimes physically ached. Hold on to that feeling, because what unfolded between us wasn't some sudden, explosive event. It was the slow, insidious erosion of that love, fueled by years of her believing it was something she was simply owed. Emily married Daniel when she was 23. Daniel was fine. He worked at a car dealership, he loved fantasy football, and he had a habit of laughing a little too loudly at his own jokes. Decent enough, I suppose. They had 3 kids in quick succession. Leo, now 11, Chloe, 9, and little Noah, who just turned 6. And look, I adore those kids. I really do. But having 3 children in 5 years, when neither parent had a stable career, felt less like a plan and more like a gamble. A gamble nobody was allowed to mention out loud. This is where things started to fracture. About 7 years ago, Daniel lost his job. He'd get another, then quit. He tried to launch a pressure washing business that imploded after 4 months. Emily was working part-time at a daycare, barely making minimum wage. Me? I was single, no kids, steadily climbing the corporate ladder. I'd just closed on my own house, for bedrooms, a generous yard, a 2-car garage. I was bursting with pride. I remember walking through it that first night, barefoot, just touching the walls, a silent affirmation that it was truly mine. Then the phone calls began. At first, maybe once a week. Hey, Sarah. Things are tight this month. Could you spot us for groceries? Of course, I said yes. She was my sister. Then, it was the electric bill. Leo's school supplies. Chloe needed new glasses. Noah had an ear infection, and the copay was more than they expected. Every single time I said yes. Because what else was I supposed to do? Let the kids go without? But here's the brutal truth nobody tells you about being the one who always helps. Eventually, people stop seeing it as generosity. They start seeing it as your job. And if you ever hesitate, even for a second, suddenly, you're the villain. Did I notice this shift happening? Honestly, no. Not at first. It crept in, subtle as a shadow, over the course of about 5 years. I estimate I gave Emily and Daniel somewhere around $60,000. I actually sat down one night, bank statements spread across my dining table, and tallied it up. The number made me feel physically sick. $60,000. That's a down payment on a house. That's 2 years of retirement contributions. That's a life I could have built differently. And not once, not a single time, did I receive a thank you card. Just a "you're the best, Sarah," via text, usually followed by another request 2 weeks later. Let me be brutally honest about something else. People sometimes ask, don't you want a family of your own? Kids. The answer is complicated. For a long time, yes. Desperately. But I spent my 30s working 60-hour weeks, funding my sister's household, always putting myself last. I went on dates, Sure, but I never had the emotional energy to invest in a real relationship. My friend Michelle, my closest confidant since college, used to say, Sarah, you're mothering Emily's whole family instead of building your own. And she was right. But when you're caught in the current, it's impossible to see the shore. So, let's fast forward to that dinner. It was last October. Emily called, said she wanted to bring the kids over. Great, I said. I made lasagna, set the table, even bought a small cake, because Noah had just started first grade, and I wanted to celebrate. The kids burst in, screaming and running, typical kids. Fine. Emily, however, just sat down at my kitchen island, poured herself a glass of my wine, and didn't even offer a proper greeting. She just scanned the kitchen, a slow, appraising look, and said, "Must be nice." I tried to laugh it off. It is nice. I worked hard for it. She didn't laugh back. Her eyes narrowed. I mean, for bedrooms for one person. Meanwhile, I've got 3 kids sharing 2 rooms in a house with no dishwasher. My stomach clenched. Not because she was wrong about her situation, but because of the biting resentment in her voice, as if it were my fault. I tried to change the subject, but Emily wasn't finished. You know what, Sarah? It's kind of unfair, don't you think? You sit here alone in this big house with your wine and your fancy lasagna, and I'm drowning. You don't even have kids. What do you need all this space for? I slowly put my fork down. My voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. Emily, I bought this house with money I earned. I chose it because I wanted it. I don't need to justify the space. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes at me. And then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. She leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. If you were a good person like a really good sister, you'd let us move in permanently. You have the room. You just don't want to share. I sat there for a moment, a slow, tight smile spreading across my face. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile that comes right before you make a decision you can never take back. That won't work, Emily, I said. She blinked, confused. What? It won't work? You're not moving in. She stood up, snatched her wine glass, and spat. Wow. You really are as cold as Daniel says you are. I let her words hang in the air. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just started clearing the plates. But inside, a quiet rage had ignited. This wasn't just about that night. This was about 7 years of writing checks and receiving nothing but criticism. 7 years of biting my tongue. 7 years of trying to be the good sister, while she played the eternal victim. And something in me, right there in my kitchen as she gathered her kids and stormed out without a goodbye, something in me decided that the ATM was officially closed. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Asterisk, maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have handled it differently. Asterisk, but honestly, can you truly imagine someone eating your food, drinking your wine, sitting in the house you paid for, and then telling you you're a bad person for not handing it all over? Because that's what happened. My friend Michelle called me later that night. I poured out the entire story, and she said one thing that stuck with me like a burr. Sarah, she said, her voice gentle but firm, it didn't lose a sister tonight. You just stopped pretending the sister you had was the one you deserved. And that hit me like a gut punch because she was absolutely right. But here's the kicker. Emily didn't take my no quietly. Not even close. What she did next honestly shocked me. And what I did after that, well, let's just say I surprised myself, too. After that explosive dinner, I half expected Emily to cool off. Maybe she'd wake up the next morning, replay her words, and feel even a flicker of embarrassment. That's what a reasonable person would do, right? But Emily didn't call to apologize. She called to double down. 3 days later, I received a text. And I wish I were making this up. It read, I talked to Daniel, and we think the fair thing would be for you to at least let the kids stay with you during the school week, so they can have their own rooms. You're not using them anyway. Not a question. Not a request. A decision she and Daniel had apparently made together about my house. My house, that I pay the mortgage on. My house, with my name on the deed. They just decided. I didn't respond. Not that day, not the next. And honestly, the silence felt powerful. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't rushing to fix things, wasn't scrambling to say yes, wasn't transferring money at midnight so Emily's electricity wouldn't get shut off. I just sat in my living room, drank my coffee, and let my phone buzz without picking it up. And that drove Emily absolutely crazy. She called 4 times the next day, leaving 2 voicemails. The first was sickeningly sweet. "Hey, Sarah, just checking in. Love you. Call me back." The second, though, revealed the real Emily. "Okay, so you're just ignoring me now? Real mature, Sarah. Real mature. Michelle told me to hold the line. The moment you respond, she'll find a crack to squeeze through. Just wait." And Michelle was right, because what happened next was something I genuinely did not expect. Emily showed up at my job. Picture this. I'm in a meeting, 6 of us, presenting a quarterly logistics report. Very professional, very serious. My coworker, Rebecca, knocks on the glass door and mouths, "Your sister's in the lobby." I almost choked on my water. I excused myself, walked out, and there was Emily, standing by the front desk, no on her hip, looking like she'd been crying for hours. She said, loud enough for the receptionist to hear, "I just need 5 minutes with my sister. She won't return my calls, and my kids are suffering." Do you see what she did? She made it public. She brought a child as a prop. She turned my workplace into her stage. And for a split second, I won't lie, it almost worked. Because Noah looked at me with those big brown eyes and whispered, "Hi, Auntie Sarah." And my heart cracked a little. But I didn't fold. I walked her outside, to a bench in the parking lot. "Emily," I said, my voice barely a whisper but laced with steel, "you cannot show up at my office. Ever. This is where I work. This is how I make the money that has been keeping your family afloat for almost a decade." She started crying harder. "You act like you're better than me." "I don't think I'm better than you," I countered, the words burning on my tongue. "I think I'm tired." "Tired of what? Tired of helping your own family?" "No, Emily. Tired of being used. There's a difference." She wiped her face and said something that actually made me laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. "Fine, then just co-sign a loan for us, so we can get a bigger place." I stared at her. "You want me to co-sign a loan for you and Daniel?" Daniel, who has had 9 jobs in 7 years and a credit score that probably starts with a 4. She didn't even deny it. She just shrugged and said, "See? There you go, being judgmental again." Honestly, I don't know if I should have laughed, but I did, right there in the parking lot. Because at some point, the sheer audacity becomes genuinely comedic. What was next? Was she going to ask me to adopt her kids and also pay her a salary for visiting them on weekends? I said no to the cosign, obviously. And then I said something I'd been holding in for a very, very long time. "Emily, I'm not giving you any more money. Not for groceries, not for bills, not for the kids' activities, not for Daniel's next business idea. It's done. I love you, but the bank is closed." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she said, "You're going to regret this." And she left, drove away, Noah still looking back at me through the rear window. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, I found out what "you're going to regret this" meant. Emily called our parents. My mom and dad, Carol and George, live about 2 hours away. They're both retired. Dad was a machinist, Mom a school secretary. Good people, quiet people. They avoid drama like the plague. And Emily knew exactly how to play them. She called Mom, crying big, ugly, theatrical tears, and told her that I had abandoned her family, that I refused to help with the kids, that I'd even called her a bad mother. None of which, by the way, was true. Mom called me Friday morning. Her voice was strained, worried. "Sarah, honey, what's going on with you and your sister? She says you've cut her off." I took a deep breath, and I told her everything. Not just the dinner, not just the parking lot incident, everything. The $60,000, the constant requests, the guilt trips, the sheer entitlement, the fact that Emily had called my house wasted space. I told her about Daniel's revolving door of jobs. I told her that I hadn't saved properly for my own retirement because I was too busy being Emily's emergency fund. I laid it all out. And here's where the truly unexpected part happens. Because I assumed Mom would do what she always did. Try to smooth things over. Tell me family is family. Ask me to be the bigger person. That's what she'd done my whole life. Every argument, every conflict, Mom's answer was always, just keep the peace, Sarah. But this time, she went quiet for a long, long time. Then she said, $60,000, give or take. Another long pause. Then Mom said, I'm calling your sister. That's all she said. No lecture for me. No guilt trip. No, but she's your sister. Just, I'm calling your sister. And she hung up. I found out later from Dad what happened on that call. And honestly, I almost felt bad for Emily. Almost. Mom called Emily, and Dad said Mom's voice was the coldest he'd heard in 40 years of marriage. She told Emily she should be ashamed of herself, that Sarah had done more for her family than any sister should ever have to. That $60,000 was more than Dad made in a year before he retired. And then Mom said the thing that apparently made Emily go completely silent. She said, your sister doesn't have a family of her own, Emily. Have you ever stopped to think about why? Have you ever wondered if maybe she spent the years she should have been dating and building her life writing checks so your children could eat? Dad said Emily didn't have an answer for that. But Mom wasn't finished. She said, and another thing, you and Daniel need to get jobs. Real jobs. Both of you, full-time. No more excuses about the kids. No more sob stories. No more calling Sarah every time the rent is due. You're 36 years old. Figure it out. Can you imagine? My mother, sweet, quiet Carol, who has never once raised her voice at Thanksgiving dinner, basically told Emily to grow up and get a job. Dad said she hung up the phone, turned to him and said, I should have said that 5 years ago. And then she just made herself a cup of tea like nothing happened. I laughed so hard when Dad told me that because that is exactly who my mother is. She's a slow burn. You think she's not paying attention, and then she absolutely levels you with one conversation. Now, Emily clearly expected Mom and Dad to take her side. That was her entire strategy. Run to the parents, cry, make Sarah look heartless. Get them to pressure me into caving. It had worked before. When we were younger, if Emily and I fought, Mom would always tell me to compromise because I was older. Emily was counting on that pattern. But patterns break. And when Mom turned on her, I don't even mean turned on her, just told her the truth for the first time, Emily didn't know what to do. She didn't call me for 3 weeks after that. Absolute silence. No texts, no voicemails, nothing. And you know what? Those 3 weeks were the most peaceful I'd had in years. I went to dinner with Michelle. I repainted my guest room, the one with the broken blinds, thanks to Leo. I started putting real money into my 401k again. I even went on a date with a guy named David from my gym. Nothing serious, but it was just nice to feel like a person again instead of a safety net. But then something genuinely weird happened. I came home from work one evening, and there was a note tucked into my front door. Not a text, not an email, a handwritten note on notebook paper, folded in half. It was from Daniel. And what he wrote in that note, honestly, I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it, but it changed the direction of everything. I'm standing on my porch, holding this folded piece of notebook paper, and I genuinely don't know what to expect. Daniel and I had never had a real conversation, not once in 13 years. He'd always just been there in the background, laughing at his own jokes, letting Emily do all the talking and all the asking. I honestly couldn't have told you what Daniel's handwriting looked like before that moment. I unfolded it. It said something like this. Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't want to hear from me either. I heard what your mom said to Emily. All of it. I've been sitting with it for 3 weeks, and I can't sleep. You gave us $60,000. I didn't know the number until your mom said it. I don't think Emily knew either. We never added it up because we never wanted to see it. I'm not writing this to ask for anything. I got a full-time job at a distribution warehouse last Monday, and I wanted you to know.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I've ever said that to you, Daniel. I sat on my porch steps and read it 3 times. And yeah, I cried a little. Not because it fixed anything, it didn't. But because in 13 years, that was the first time Daniel ever acknowledged that what I did was real and that it cost me something. Now, does that note erase 7 years of being used?
No.
But it told me at least one person in that house was starting to wake up. I didn't respond. Michelle had said, wait and see if actions follow words. So I waited. 2 weeks later, Dad called casual like he was mentioning the weather. Daniel's working full-time. And your sister got a job at the front desk of a dentist's office. I could hear the relief in his voice. I said, good for them. And I meant it, carefully. Dad paused, then added, your mother hasn't stopped talking about that phone call. She keeps saying she enabled Emily for too long. That surprised me. I never blamed Mom. She grew up in a family where you just helped each other, no matter what. She didn't know how to draw lines because nobody taught her. And honestly, I inherited that from her. That's exactly why it took me 7 years and $60,000 to finally say no. Another month passed. December hit, and I started dreading Christmas. Our family always gathered at Mom and Dad's, and I couldn't picture sitting across from Emily, pretending things were fine. Michelle invited me to spend the holiday with her family. I was seriously considering it. Then Emily texted, the first contact in almost 2 months. Can we talk? Not about money. Just talk. I stared at it for a whole day.
Part of me wanted to ignore it.
Part of me wanted to send something sarcastic. But a bigger part, the part that still remembered her climbing into my bed during thunderstorms, typed back, Saturday. My house. Just you. She pulled into my driveway in that beat-up minivan and sat in the car for 5 full minutes. I watched from the window. She was gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing something. When she finally walked in, she looked different. Not physically, but smaller. Not sad, exactly. Humbled. Like someone who'd been wearing a costume for years and had finally taken it off. She sat at my kitchen island, the same spot as that awful October dinner. I made coffee, set a mug in front of her, and waited. I was done being the person who fills silence to make everyone else comfortable. Finally, she spoke. I don't know how to start. Start with whatever's true. She stared into her mug. I've been a terrible sister to you.
I didn't argue.
I didn't rush to say, no, you haven't. Because she was right. And the kindest thing I could do was let that truth sit there without softening it. She continued, when Mom told me the number, $60,000, I threw up. Literally went to the bathroom and threw up. Because I knew it was true, and I'd never once thought about it as a total. Every time I asked, I told myself it was small. Just groceries. Just one bill. I never added it up because then I'd have to face what I was doing to you. Her voice cracked. And when Mom said the part about you not having a family, about you spending your 30s keeping us afloat instead of building your own life, Sarah, it was like someone turned the lights on in a room I'd been sitting in for years. I never thought about it. I just told myself you were fine. Big house, big career. I told myself you were the lucky one. I put my mug down. And I said something I had never said out loud to anyone. Emily, I wanted kids. I wanted a partner. I wanted what you have. But every time I got close to focusing on myself, you needed something. And I couldn't say no. Because what kind of sister says no? So I said yes, until there was nothing left to give anyone else.
She cried.
Not the theatrical kind from before, but the quiet, heaving kind that comes when you actually hear something you can't unhear.
I'm so sorry, Sarah.
And here's where you might expect me to say, I forgave her instantly, and we hugged, and everything was beautiful. But that's not real life. I said, I appreciate that. But sorry doesn't give me back my 30s. Sorry doesn't refund $60,000. Sorry doesn't undo years of feeling like a wallet with a heartbeat. I accept your apology, but forgiveness takes time, and I need to see real, sustained change. Not 3 good weeks followed by another call asking for rent. She nodded. No argument. No defensiveness. Just, that's fair. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the counter. Inside was a check for $500. The memo line read, one of many. She shrugged. I know it's nothing compared to what you gave, but Daniel and I made a budget for the first time in our lives. Every month, we're paying you back, even if it takes 10 years. $500 out of $60,000. Mathematically, it's a drop in the ocean.
But it wasn't about the math.
It was about her sitting down, writing that check, putting it in an envelope, and driving it to my house. It was about her saying, "I see what you sacrificed." I picked up the check. "Thank you." And then, because I'm still Sarah and I still have a bit of that fire, I added, "The blinds in the guest room are $78, by the way." Adding that to the tab. She laughed. A real one. The first real laugh I'd heard from her in a long time. And I laughed, too. And just for a second, sitting there with our coffee, I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed. She was still in there, somewhere. Christmas was quiet that year. I went to Mom and Dad's. Emily, Daniel, and the kids were there. Nobody mentioned the money or the fight. Mom made her pot roast. Dad fell asleep watching football by halftime. The kids ran wild in the yard. Emily and I didn't have some big, dramatic moment. We just coexisted gently, like two people learning to share a room again without resentment pressing down on everything. After dinner, she helped me wash dishes side by side at the sink like teenagers. She bumped me with her hip and said, "Nice house. And you still can't load a dishwasher, right?" I bumped her back. "Nice job. And you still can't let a joke go." Small but ours. That was 4 months ago. Daniel's still working. Emily's still at the dentist's office. I've gotten 3 more checks, $500 each, right on schedule. We text now, not like before. No money requests. Normal stuff. She sent me Noah's science project. I sent her mom's banana bread recipe. Is my heart fully healed?
No. I still get angry sometimes.
I still calculate what my savings could look like. I still wonder what my life might be if I'd said no the very first time. And that's okay. Healing isn't a straight line. But here's what I've learned. Saying no to someone you love is not cruelty. It might be the very thing that saves the relationship. Because as long as I kept saying yes, Emily had no reason to grow. My no was the first honest thing anyone had said to her in years. It hurt us both. But it was the start of something real. Mom told me last week she's proud of me. She said, "You did what I couldn't do. You told the truth and held the line." That meant more than any apology ever could. I'm still single, still in my 4-bedroom house, but every room's repainted. I'm saving real money again. And David from the gym asked me out last Tuesday. So maybe my 40s will be the decade I finally put myself first. And I mean that in the best way possible. Emily and I have a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, we're walking in the same direction. And my guest room has new blinds.
So, that's my story.
If you found yourself nodding along, I'd really appreciate a like. It means more than you think. And if something here reminded you of your own family, or if you would have handled any of this differently, drop that in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives honestly help me feel less alone. Whether you're the Sarah in your family, the Emily, or even the Daniel who's finally waking up, I see you.